It was 56 years ago. A 6-year-old boy vanished in these mountains, and no one has ever found him. But what if the answer has been here the whole time? In November of 2020, I got COVID, and for 3 long weeks I was stuck at home. I could not sleep at night, and I started watching hiking and backpacking videos. And then something different caught my attention. Stories about people who went missing in the wilderness and were never found. That's when I came across a YouTube channel called The Missing Enigma, and one case really stuck out to me: Dennis Martin. Because I had heard this story before, but I had not thought about it since I was a child. See, in August 1969, I was 8 years old, about to turn 9. My family was taking our first trip to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. I can still remember the drive into Gatlinburg and seeing that beautiful mountain stream beside the road and the mountains rising straight up out of the ground. I can remember saying, I can't wait to get out and do some exploring in the woods. It was then my mother turned to me, and she was visibly shaken, and she said, "You will not go out exploring in those woods. A little boy about your age got lost and they can't find him." I asked her how long he'd been missing, and she said over a month. I asked her what happened to him, and she responded, "No one knows." That moment was stuck in my memory, and now I know. She was talking about Dennis Martin. But what happened? Perhaps you've never heard this story. I will share the details as quickly as possible, although this is a long story with many twists and turns. It was June 14th, 1969, Father's Day weekend, and the Martin family were on their annual backpacking trip in the Smokies. This was Dennis' first time backpacking with the men. The group included his father, Bill, or William, his grandfather, Clyde, and his older brother, Doug, who was about 9. They had hiked from Cades Cove to the Russell Field shelter the previous day, and now they'd hiked about 2 miles to the Spence Field shelter along the Appalachian Trail. Spence Field was a grassy meadow located on the ridgeline between Tennessee and North Carolina at an elevation of 5,000 feet. They had met another family along the trail who had 2 boys who were close to the age of Dennis and Doug, and the 4 boys were playing out in a grassy field less than 100 yards from the adults when they got the idea of sneaking up on them from behind. It was about 4:30 p.m. when Doug and the 2 other boys went to the south and then back to the west. But since Dennis was wearing a bright red shirt, they sent him to the northwest, and he was supposed to loop back around from the north. The adults saw the boys split up and knew what they were up to. In a few minutes, the 3 boys appeared, but Dennis did not appear. His father began to look for him within 3 to 5 minutes, although some say it could have been 5 to 10 minutes, but he was nowhere to be found. He went down the trail for about a mile, calling out for Dennis and asking anyone on the trail if they had seen him. Then he returned and went all the way back to the Russell Field shelter. While Bill was searching the AT, his father Clyde made his way down the Anthony Creek Trail back to Cades Cove, which was about 9 miles. He reached the ranger station around 8:30 p.m., and this set everything in motion for the official search to begin. It was about that same time that it began to rain, and that night it rained somewhere between 2.5 and 3 inches. Clyde Martin made the hike back to Spence Field that night in the dark and in the rain. The family, as well as some rangers, searched throughout the night, although they were greatly hampered by the wind and rain. If Dennis did call out, it would have been nearly impossible to hear him. The next day, on June 15th, the search ramped up, leading to the largest search in the history of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. At the height of the search, more than 1,400 volunteers were looking for Dennis. This included National Park rangers, local volunteers, rescue squads, special forces who were training in the Nantahala area, helicopters, tracking dogs, and an airplane equipped with infrared that was used during the night. Altogether, they covered over 56 square miles, but nothing was ever found of Dennis. The only sign was a child's shoe print and a bare footprint located near a stream in the West Prong area. But at that time, it was thought to be made by a group of Boy Scouts who were searching the park. But later, many believed it could have been significant. The search continued in force until June the 29th before it was scaled back. 3 rangers continued the search until September 13th. Dwight McCarter was a young ranger in the park at that time, and he was heavily involved in the search. He stated that the rain turned the trail into mud, washed away his scent trail, and the noise of the raging streams made it very difficult to hear. They also realized that they had too many people in the field searching, and that probably destroyed any evidence that could have been used to track him. This is a direct quote from Ranger McCarter. I had just finished reading the paper and was watching and listening to the storm for over an hour when the telephone rings. The call is from Chief Ranger Snedden, who tells me about the Martin boy and asked me to report for duty tomorrow at 5 a.m. at the Boat Mountain Trail. I do not say so to him, but I know the rainstorm is a major complication to the search, greatly diminishing the chances of finding Dennis. There is a serious risk of exposure and hypothermia for the boy. The rain will wash out whatever tracking sign we might have been able to find, rendering the use of tracking dogs all but useless. Much was learned from the operations that took place in the search for Dennis Martin. Since that time, searchers have learned that children tend to travel downhill when lost. They often travel much further than expected, and they will many times follow a stream. The volunteers primarily searched the area near Spence Field, paying special attention to the Eagle Creek and Anthony Creek drainages. But nothing was ever found of Dennis. Then in 1985, a man came forward telling Dwight McCarter that he and another man had been hunting ginseng in the Big Hollow area around 1974 when they came across a child's skeleton, including the skull. They did not come forward at the time because they were fearful of being prosecuted for illegally hunting ginseng. Dwight McCarter took 30 men to search the Big Hollow area, but they did not find anything. But Big Hollow does fit the scenario, as Dennis Martin was last seen heading in that direction. A ridge leads downhill from Spence Field to Big Hollow, which is about 3.5 miles away, and a stream flows down from the ridgeline through the middle of Big Hollow. Dwight McCarter considered the man credible and knew him personally. But after so many years, any remains would have been scattered and buried under feet of debris. So there's a great deal to this story that I did not cover, as many felt Dennis Martin could have been abducted or wandered into the Eagle Creek or the Anthony Creek drainages. But after years of looking into this, I really believe the Big Hollow area is probably where Dennis Martin ended up. Then in January of 2023, this became personal once again. A 41-year-old man from the church I pastor went missing in the Bankhead National Forest. We searched for 10 days. We had up to 100 volunteers combing the woods. When we finally found him, he had passed away. In fact, the coroner said he probably passed away the first day out from hypothermia. And here's what really hit me. When we went back and looked at the search grids, 2 of our teams had come within 150 feet of his body and never saw him. As I made my way through the steep hollows and ravines of the Bankhead National Forest, it hit me how hard it is to find someone who's missing in the wilderness, especially if they're deceased. They could be just 20 feet away and you walk right by them. It is really like looking for a needle in a haystack. I'm heading out to Big Hollow so I can see this area for myself. I can't really explain why. I just feel compelled to go see it for myself.
Okay, I want you to know I'm not going out here half-cocked. Got my Garmin inReach, bear spray, knife, I've got other protection. In my day pack, I've got everything you would need if you need to spend some time out here, even overnight. My wife knows where I am. She knows when to expect me back. This is a rugged area, and you need to be prepared when you go out in the backcountry, especially by yourself. So I'm protected. And here we go. Let's go up there and see what we can find. That's Big Hollow right up there. It looks like I might be able to get up this hill. It's pretty steep, but that'll get us up into Big Hollow. It's back in this area right here, and we'll see what we can find. If nothing else, this will give us a pretty good understanding and picture of what the terrain is like in the Smoky Mountains, what the searchers were dealing with as they were looking for Dennis Martin. So I made it up through this first little section. I don't know what that plant is, but it's very dense. Can't tell it, but it's really rocky underneath that. A lot of loose rocks. I found a little trail, faintly marked, going up the side here. It's probably a game trail, so I'm going to follow it up, see where it goes. So this is looking up the ridge. It's very steep, a lot of rhododendron. And as you come down here, I'm still on this little trail, and I've come across a little depression in the trail. And the two ginseng hunters said that they found the bones of what they believed to be a small child in a depression like this. So let's make our way on over a little bit more, see what we can find. Wow. Now this view gives you a good idea of just how steep the ridge lines are here in the Smokies. That's pretty steep. Okay, I believe this is Big Hollow proper. That's looking down toward the creek. And then if we pan around, it is pretty substantial. I've got this on wide angle. And that's looking up toward the mountain ridge. So this is a big hollow for sure. So let's walk up toward the ridge line and just look for more of these areas that are like a depressed area near a large tree. Some people may say, well, there's no way a 6-year-old could make it this far. But the truth is, he was just 6 days away from being 7 when he went missing. And he had already walked a total of 9 miles from Cades Cove to get to Spence Shelter. I think they stayed the first night at Russell Shelter and then on to Spence Field Shelter. So and his dad said he didn't have any problem making that walk, that hike. So yes, he very well could have traveled 4 miles, especially up on the ridge line. This hollow is pretty massive. And I was noticing here's a stream that's running down, and he may have followed, if he came this way, followed the stream down. So I'm nearly to the ridge, and I've come up pretty much the middle of this, and I found countless spots that the two ginseng hunters described, large tree, depression around it, rocky areas to look at. But the problem now, it's been 56 years, and if the bones were there, they're probably under 2 or 3 feet of leaf debris by now. But why do I put stock in the theory of the two ginseng hunters and what they said? Well, it doesn't make sense why they would tell that story unless there was some validity to it. Now, supposedly it was around 1974, which was like 5 years after Dennis went missing, that they were digging in this area, hunting ginseng illegally, and they came across the bones of what they said looked like a small child. And it was almost 9 years later, 10 years later, when they finally told the rangers about what they had found. And they led, I believe, 30 men into this area, but they didn't find anything. Of course, that was 9 or 10 years later, and the bones could have been buried under, by then, a foot of leaves. And so it makes no sense why they would make that story up and lead a group of 30 men up in this area unless they actually had found bones. And it also would make sense why they didn't find Dennis if he had traveled along the ridge line to this area. You know, he's nearly 4 miles from Spence Field, and they wouldn't think a young man could travel that far. It would also make sense that Dennis would come down through this area if he was trying to get down from the ridge line following the stream. I don't know, but his father may have told him that if you ever get lost, follow a stream downhill that will take you to civilization, and that is generally true. In fact, if he'd come down by this stream and just kept walking, he would have walked right out on the road, the Tremont Road. So he would have been probably found. But if he fell off the ridge line up here and was injured, or it was too late in the day and he looked for a place to stay, for the night, not realizing there's a road down there, he could have died the first night from hypothermia. It rained 3 inches the night he was lost and got down to about 50. So if he got soaking wet, and I don't see anywhere around here to take cover, it would make sense that he would look for a big tree with a rocky area, with some rocks maybe, to try to get some shelter, not realizing that it was going to start raining that night. So he may have died the very first night out from exposure. And I don't even know if they came and looked in this area. I don't know if they came this far over. I think they did like 56 square miles, but it's so easy. One thing I learned from the only search and rescue that I've done, which was in the Bankhead National Forest in 2023, January and February of 2023, is in woods like this, someone could be 100 feet away and you not see them. In fact, the man we were looking for in the Bankhead National Forest, we got within about 150 or 200 feet of him twice. We had GPS on all the people that were searching, and when they went back and looked at the grid lines, we had teams that were within probably 200 feet of him twice up on the top of a mountain and did not see his body. So, it's harder than you think. When you get into deep woods like this, it's actually like looking for a needle in a haystack. It really is to find someone, and especially a small child. And the Smokies, the rhododendron, the steep ridges, a lot of these ridges, they're probably 70 degree, 80 degree angles. I've done a lot of hiking up here. You can't walk down them. You could fall down them, but this might be where I would think if he ended up maybe here, but we really don't know. So I'm going to walk on up to the head of the ridge, and then I'm going to work my way down by the creek, and I'm going to call it a day. I wasn't really expecting to find anything, but I was thinking, well, maybe some wild pigs rooted out that area, and you would see a bone laying on top of the ground. And there have been a lot of wild hogs, I can tell, rooting around here. So let me get on up here, and then I'll catch you back when I get back down by the creek. So I've gone about as far up as I'm gonna go. It just gets too rough looking up there, and I'm running out of time. But you're thinking, some of you, it's 56 years, why did nobody find it? Well, first of all, it's a national park, and almost everybody stays on the trails unless you're searching for somebody. Nobody goes off trail like this. First of all, it's really hard to get up here. I'm in the winter. Can you imagine in the summer with everything grown up? There's probably rattlesnakes up here the size of my leg. So why would you come up here? You can't camp up here. Now in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, you can go off trail. But at some of the national parks, you can't go off trail at all. Some of you may say, well, I know somebody that was lost in the wilderness for years and years and they finally found him. That's probably a national forest. Because you know why? You can hunt in a national forest. And hunters are the crazy ones that go off trail and go up in some place like this looking for white-tailed deer or whatever they're hunting for, wild boar. So that's usually the case there, that a hunter will find them, and that's usually in a national forest, a wilderness area where hunting is allowed. Otherwise, hikers and backpackers, they stay on trail. So the ginseng hunters, that would make sense that they would find him if they were up here digging for ginseng in this area, that they might come across his body. But we may never know. 30 men scoured this area over and they didn't find anything. So it's still a mystery. Well, they say curiosity killed the cat, and I understand that. My curiosity got the best of me, so I decided to come up more. I am now probably 200 feet from where it starts going straight up the side of the mountain there, straight up the ridge line. I will say it got a lot more treacherous. Everything's covered in moss. It's very rocky, a lot of water coming down here. The creek kind of splits in half. A lot of downed trees. Good thing I brought my hiking poles. I usually don't bring them, but I thought, why not? So I've come up as far as I'm gonna go, and this is a big hollow. It's huge. I can't even see down to the creek anymore, down by the road, the river down there. So I've come as far as I'm gonna go, and I'm headed down. Okay, this is looking down the hollow as I'm starting down, and I know the camera doesn't do it justice, but this is pretty steep right through here. It does level out after you get down there probably about 500 feet. It's not as bad. I think sometimes I forget that this is a story about a little boy just 6 days before his 7th birthday who was going on the camping trip of his life, backpacking trip. I think this was his first year to go with his family. His grandfather, his father, his older brother Douglas, they made this trip before. In fact, I think it was a family tradition, and some of the other family was going to hike out the next day and meet them there, and did. But what turned out to be just a joyous time for him became a nightmare. Can you imagine being lost in these woods in June? That means everything was green, everything was thick. And I imagine that he panicked to begin with and maybe started running through the woods trying to find his way. And then once he realized he was lost, I think he decided to just keep walking and see if he could walk his way out. Thinking, well, I've already walked all the way from Cave Cove to get here. I can just keep walking and find my way out. And perhaps that's why he ended up, if he did, in Big Hollow, he ended up this far away from Spence Field shelter. Now, they have found that children go a lot further than you think they do when they get lost. Many times. They don't sit down and wait, which is what you should do. Once you realize you're lost, stay where you are. But as a little boy, I imagine he was just terrified, especially as it started getting dark. And perhaps that's the ginseng hunter said there was a large tree there and a rocky area and a depression. Maybe he decided to stay there for the night, thinking he would have some protection there. Of course, then it started raining. 3 inches of rain that night. That's crazy. And the way these ravines are so steep and these streams drop off so fast, I'm sure this stream became a raging torrent, as most of the streams did. And so getting down to 50 that night and getting completely soaked, he probably died from exposure that first night. As sad as that is to think. Probably he got hypothermia. And hypothermia will kill you quickly. I've seen it in people. Yeah, once you get so low, it's hard to recover from that. Well, let's make our way down to the car and get out of here. I'm about halfway down.
The Missing Enigma channel on YouTube with Nick Kyle is probably the most reliable place to find information about the Dennis Martin case. He has interviewed a man named Michael Bouchard, who is a detective who has done extensive investigative work into the Dennis Martin case and interviewed many of the people that were involved. And if you're looking for information on Dennis Martin, that channel is the best place to look. He dispels many of the myths and just misinformation that's out there on the internet about this case.
Okay, I made it back to the car. That was a 3.5 or 4 hour trip. Very steep getting up to Big Hollow. A lot of brush, a lot of rhododendron. Fortunately, I was able to find a game trail, and that helped me get up there and back down safely. But I did this primarily so you would see what it's like when someone goes missing in a wilderness area, and specifically the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Very steep ravines, very steep ridge lines, a lot of brush, a lot of rhododendron. This whole hillside right here, going up to the hollow, is just covered in thick rhododendron. So it is possible if someone gets lost and passes away soon afterwards, which I believe Dennis probably passed away the first night, you may never find their body. It would be nice if somebody found his remains, but that's probably never going to happen. But you know what? He's not there. I believe he's in a better place. Hey, I want to thank you for joining me on this adventure, and I hope you got something out of it. Please leave a comment. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. This was a very sad story, but one that I believe needed to be told. Thanks for watching. Bye.
As the sun rises over these mountains, I think about a little boy who came here in 1969 and never made it home, Dennis Martin. I think about his family who carried that loss for a lifetime. This video is for Dennis and for every family still searching for answers.